Hello and welcome to Dear Jordan. Before we get into today's letter, I just want to take a second to say thank you for being here. I know there are a lot of things you could be listening to, a lot of places your attention could go, so the fact that you choose to sit with me and these letters, it really doesn't go unnoticed. Today's letter is about something that I think a lot of us misunderstand and honestly normalize a little too much. And that's the idea that peace is something you earn. Somewhere along the way, we were taught that if we were patient enough, if we love hard enough, if we stay long enough, things will eventually settle, that the chaos will calm down, that people will change, that the situation will finally feel safe. And we call that commitment. We call that loyalty. We even call that love. But what we don't always realize is how much of ourselves we're giving up in the process. Because if your peace is always on the other side of someone else's behavior, you're going to spend a lot of your life waiting for things to feel okay, waiting to exhale, waiting for a version of life that may never actually come. And in the meantime, you adjust, you tolerate, you make things make sense that don't really make sense, just so you can function inside of it. And I think a lot of us learned that early. Not always in extreme ways, sometimes just in subtle ones, environments that looked fine on the outside but didn't feel safe on the inside. So we grow up thinking that's normal, that love feels like tension, that home feels like something you have to escape from sometimes, that peace is something you visit, not something you live in. Today's letter is about that. It's about what it looks like to grow up without consistent peace, how that follows you into adulthood, and what it means to finally realize that peace was never supposed to be something you begged for in the first place. So grab yourself a cup of coffee and listen in. Dear Jordan, to say that I grew up in a peaceful household would be a reach. I don't often look back at my childhood and think I would give anything to return to it. There are small pockets of memory I would revisit, moments that felt light, safe, or simple, but those are few and far between. For most of my life, I was searching for something I didn't even fully understand at the time. I was searching for peace, and if I'm being honest, it took me nearly 40 years to find it. I hope that isn't your story, because 40 years is a long time to wait for something that should never have felt out of reach to begin with. I could say that those years taught me everything, that they shaped me into the person I am today. And while that's true, it doesn't change the fact that it's a hard thing to admit, that it took that long to feel something as simple as peace. Not borrowed, not temporary, but peace in a space that was mine. So I learned to look for it elsewhere, not just in places, but in my mind. Because when peace isn't something you can access around you, you learn to create it wherever you can. And for me, that started with a dream. So growing up, I had this dream. I was walking with a figure, but I never saw his face. I only saw his fingers and his feet. And they looked like the Jesus that had been drawn on the cover of my Bible. So in my mind, I believed that's who I was walking with. He would take my hand and walk me away. Not into anything loud or overwhelming or into anything spectacular or filled with things meant to impress me. He simply walked me away. We walked into a field where the grass was greener than anything I had ever seen, and there was something about him holding my hand that gave me an overwhelming sense of comfort. Then he leaned forward and handed me a balloon, a single red balloon. Nothing extravagant, nothing complicated, but in that moment I felt secure, and that's all I remember. But what stayed with me wasn't the balloon, it was the feeling. That moment where he took my hand and led me out of where I was into somewhere quieter, somewhere safe. And looking back now, I realized something. That was the only place I had access to peace. Because inside my home, there were a lot of arguments. Sometimes walls would be punched. Sometimes furniture would be thrown. I remember my parents' bedroom slowly becoming emptier over time because something would get broken almost every weekend. And even though I wasn't in the room, I could hear it. Not being able to see what was happening, but hearing it, feeling it, anticipating it, created a kind of anxiety that settled into my body. Psychologically, when you grow up around unpredictable conflict, your nervous system doesn't learn how to rest. It learns how to prepare. That constant state of readiness, that's called hypervigilance. It's your mind trying to protect you even when there's nothing happening in the moment. And spiritually, I believe God met me there anyway. Because even then, when I didn't fully understand what I was feeling, I had that dream. I had that moment where I could close my eyes and see him take my hand and lead me out. And the truth is, I still do that today. I still picture him taking my hand and walking me out of whatever space I'm in that doesn't feel peaceful. Not because I'm running away, but because I now understand that peace is something God allows me to step into. You will keep in perfect peace those whose minds are stayed on you. It says that in Isaiah chapter 26, verse 3. And I think in a childlike way, that's what I was doing, holding on to the only version of peace I could access at the time. And eventually, that way of coping followed me into adulthood. Except it didn't look like a dream anymore. It looked like leaving. There was a time in my adult life where I found myself begging for peace. My home had become so chaotic, so heavy to exist in, that I would look for any excuse to be somewhere else, anywhere else. And this wasn't the home I grew up in. This was the space I chose, a relationship I chose to be in, that if I'm honest, never provided peace. But it felt familiar. It carried the same tension, the same unpredictability, the same feeling of never fully being able to exhale. And that's the part I didn't understand at the time. When something feels familiar, we mistake it for something that fits, even when it's the very thing we've been trying to escape. There was a point where I realized I couldn't stay there, so I left. I made the decision to step out of that relationship because I knew it wasn't giving me peace. And I thought that leaving it would. I thought peace would meet me on the other side of that decision, but it didn't. Not because I was holding on to chaos, but because the chaos didn't fully let go of me. The relationship may have ended, but the attachment didn't. There was still access, still communication, still a pull that kept things from ever feeling fully settled. He had moved on, entered into another relationship, and that was part of why things ended between us. But at the same time, he didn't fully release me either. And that kind of in between, that kind of unresolved attachment, it doesn't create peace, it creates confusion. It keeps you emotionally tethered to something that no longer has a place in your life, but hasn't fully left it either. And when you're in that space, you're not grounded, you're not settled, you're still trying to find somewhere to land. And confusion will have you reaching for anything that feels like relief. It was then when I met someone I really liked spending time with. He probably thought I just wanted to be around him, and yes, that was part of it, but it wasn't the whole truth. The truth was I didn't want to be at home. So I would ask to come over, and when asking didn't feel like enough, I would offer, I'll do your laundry, I'll wash your dishes, I'll fold your clothes, I'll clean up, whatever you need. Anything just to not be in my own house. And if you know me, you know those are the exact things I don't enjoy doing. But in that moment, even the things I hated felt lighter than what I was going back to. That's what survival can look like sometimes. When peace feels scarce, we start to associate safety with proximity to people instead of stability within ourselves. So we overextend, we overgive, we become useful just to feel allowed to stay. I would drive hours, cross state lines, rearrange my entire day just for a few moments where my mind could rest, where my chest didn't feel tight, where I didn't feel like I was constantly bracing myself for what came next. And looking back now, I can see it clearly. I wasn't just asking to spend time with someone, I was begging for access to peace. And that's the part that still sits with me. Because peace should not be something you have to search for in other people's homes. It shouldn't be something you earn by being useful, agreeable, or convenient. It shouldn't be something you have to travel for. It should exist where you lay your head at night. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. John chapter 14, verse 27. And this is what I want you to understand about peace, in a way I didn't for a very long time. Peace is not silence. Peace is not the absence of problems. Peace is the absence of internal chaos. It's the ability to sit in a space, whether things are perfect or not, and still feel settled within yourself. Psychologically, peace feels like your nervous system being able to rest, not constantly scanning, not constantly bracing, not constantly trying to figure out what's about to go wrong. And you recognize it by how your body responds. You can breathe fully. Your shoulders aren't tight. Your thoughts aren't racing to make sense of something that doesn't make sense. There's no confusion about where you stand, no tension about what version of someone you're going to get. And spiritually, peace is alignment. It's what it feels like when something is not working against you, because God is not the author of confusion, but of peace. That's something I think about a lot now, especially as your mom. I know I'm not perfect. I get frustrated. I raise my voice sometimes over things like laundry on the floor or dishes left in the sink. I have my moments, but even in those moments, I'm aware of something I didn't understand back then. What a home feels like matters more than what it looks like, because emotionally safe environments don't require perfection. They require consistency, repair, and presence. And if I can give you a space where you feel safe, where you can exhale, where you don't feel like you have to leave in order to feel okay, then I've given you something I spent most of my life trying to find. It took me a long time to understand this, Jordan, longer than I would have liked. But peace is not something you beg for. It's not something you convince someone to give you. It's not something you earn by being patient enough, quiet enough, helpful enough, or understanding enough. And it's definitely not something you negotiate your worth around. Peace is something you choose. And sometimes choosing it doesn't look soft. Sometimes it looks like walking away from people you care about. Sometimes it looks like saying no when it would be easier to say yes. Sometimes it looks like sitting alone for a while instead of surrounding yourself with things that feel familiar but unsettled. But here's the truth I need you to carry with you. Anything that constantly disturbs your peace but asks you to stay is asking you to betray yourself. And I don't want you to do that. I don't want you to confuse chaos with love. I don't want you to think that feeling anxious, uncertain, or emotionally exhausted is just part of caring about someone. It's not. For God is not the author of confusion, but of peace. 1 Corinthians chapter 14, verse 33. But the fruit of the Spirit is peace. Galatians chapter 5, verse 22. So if you ever find yourself in a space where you feel like you have to beg for peace, I want you to remember me. I want you to remember how long it took me to learn this and how much of my life I spent searching for something that should have never been missing in the first place. And then I want you to choose differently. Choose the space that lets you breathe. Choose the people who don't make you question your place in their life. Choose the life that doesn't require you to abandon yourself just to keep it. And most importantly, choose peace like it was always yours to begin with. Because for a long time, I thought peace was something I had to escape to, like a dream, like someone taking my hand, walking me away, and giving me something gentle to hold on to. But what I understand now, that I didn't understand then, is that peace isn't something you visit. It's something you build. It's something you protect. It's something you're allowed to keep. You don't have to wait for someone to lead you to it. You get to choose it right where you are. And I say this with all the love I am still learning how to give. Your mom. If this is something you've experienced, if you've ever felt like peace was something you had to search for or earn or wait for someone else to give you, I just want you to sit with this for a second. You're allowed to choose it, even if that choice feels unfamiliar, even if it looks different than what you thought your life would be, even if it means letting go of things you once believed were meant for you. Because peace isn't something that's supposed to come and go depending on who you're around. It's something that should feel steady. And if it doesn't, that's something to pay attention to. Not judge, not panic, just notice. And then, little by little, choose differently. Thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the time to sit with me and with this letter. If this episode resonated with you, make sure you're following Dear Jordan on Spotify so you don't miss the next one. I also write daily reflections on my blog, short, honest takeaways like this one. So if you need something to ground you in between episodes, that's there for you too. And if you're in a place where you're trying to figure out how to actually apply this in your life, how to move differently, think differently, and create more peace in your day-to-day, I do offer coaching. The link is always in the description. But either way, take what applies, leave what doesn't, and I'll meet you in the next letter. This has been Dear Jordan, Letters to My Daughter.